This video will be concerned with family business challenges. Family businesses are very important in the economy. They represent very small businesses, usually family based. They may be involved in traditional items of production, maybe artisan products or craftware, or even food outlets, small food outlets. But family businesses are very important within the economy, and are really if you like, a subsection of small business and our considerations of small businesses. So let's talk about family businesses and look at some of the challenges they face. Family businesses face many pressures and challenges from within the business, that's internal to them, and outside the business, external. So in common with, in fact, any other business, they have internal and external problems. But some of the problems they face will be unique to them. They face problems that perhaps other businesses don't face, by virtue of the fact that they are family businesses. Hodgetts and Carrasco, they suggest, they illustrate Barnes and Simmons' framework on pressures and interests in a family business, and we're going to have a look at that in a little more detail. But family business owners must deal with business pressures that exist inside and outside the business, and we'll have a look at this in this model. So first of all, we'll set it up in it'll be four boxes, but of four boxes with different issues. And the first one we'll set up here is issues that are inside the business and inside the family. So inside the business and inside the family, what issues arise? Well, the family managers hanging on to or getting hold of company control. So there may be tensions within the family as to who runs the business. It's a family business, but if the father runs it or the mother runs it, then the children, and as they grow into adults, will want to take over the business perhaps, and there may be disputes between them as to who's more suitable, and there's an issue of succession, that when perhaps the parents hand on the business to one of the children, it'll be seen as favoritism within the family and cause family issues. There are problems family problems in dealing with this type of business. And who should be selected as business managers from within the family, who've got the right competencies and the right attitudes within the family? And as I said, it does create ill will, and that's the problem. There's also a need to have a continuity of family investment and involvement in the business. So there is a problem of making sure that there is proper succession within the business. The business will continue. So we often hear of family businesses today that have been in existence for the last 100 years. Well, clearly not the same person has run it for the last 100 years. So there must have been succession. But with succession, that can lead to jealousy and envy as well. But also selecting the right person, who's going to do the best job to keep the business running. And it's building a dynasty, it's building a company that's going to last over generations. And the last point there, of course, is the rivalry which I've been talking about within the family and how that is dealt with. So there are problems within family businesses. We can see immediately the nature of these problems by just simply looking inside the business and inside the family and seeing how that would work. But if we look outside the family, but inside the business, the employees, the rewards of loyalty, how are the employees rewarded for their loyalty? And how does the family, or how do the managers of the business pick the employees to reward, and how do they administer schemes for motivation of employees, and how did they handle the whole employee issue successfully? And then there's sharing of equity, growth, and success. When the business does well, how do they share it out? How do they share out the success of the business? How much goes to the employees? How much goes to the family? How much goes to the managers? How much is held in reserve for the business? Who decides this? And what processes must be undertaken to get decisions approved? Or is it the case that the manager of the business has got overall authority? And that needs to be stated right at the start. And then there are professionalism issues. How does the owner of the business, the manager of the business, deal with the employees and deal with all of the shareholders, or stakeholders, I should say, for that reason? How does it deal with all of the stakeholders professionally, but at the same time present an accessible and friendly front? It's a family business after all, so the employees may expect the manager to be approachable, but there's a tension between being professional and being too accessible. So getting the balance right is an issue. And we are here, by the way, talking about stakeholders. We're not talking about shareholders. I mentioned earlier, shareholders are for limited companies, registered limited companies, and not necessarily family businesses. So we're talking about stakeholders more specifically. I'm sorry. Right. Bridging family transitions. Well, when families change, as they do, because as generations go by, some members may die, or may want to live in other parts of the world, or may want to not be involved with the business, or whatever it is. So families change over time, but the business is a constant. So it's trying to bridge the tensions of meeting the requirements of the family, although the family is changing, whilst at the same time meeting the requirements to the stakeholders. The stakeholders in this case could be the customers or the suppliers to the business, not just the employees. So it's trying to grow the business, maintain the business, even though the family itself, which was the bedrock of the business, the family has changed immensely. Now, we can see this in many family businesses that have now grown to be multinationals. Guinness, for example, is a family firm. But now it's a multinational firm. It exports across the world. There are many firms that started as small traders, sometimes started in shops as retailers, and have now grown into being producers of products and exporters of products. So the business is one aspect that is left to grow and develop and being run perhaps professionally by a manager, when the family must have the discipline to allow that manager to make good decisions on their behalf. The problem is, of course, that making decisions can be two ways. The decisions may be bad decisions, and in which case the family may want to get more involved again, or at least to scrutinize the decisions before they're implemented. So it is complex as to how they deal with that. And then there's the stake in the company. How how many of the employees are involved in the company itself, are involved and have a share in the business, have an involvement in the business. The employees may seem or may feel that they're not that important. They are simple functionaries. Or they may be involved because they have a stake in the business. It depends on the policy of the family towards the employees. The family may want the employees involved so that they are more motivated and they will understand the business more and understand the problems of the business. Or they may not want them, in which case they pay them a salary and expect them to perform certain functions, and that's the end of it. But we can see immediately from all of this so far, and we haven't finished yet, is that family businesses are complex. They're complex because they've got this extra dimension, the family, that, for example, limited companies don't have. Limited companies are, in a sense, very clean organizations in their structure. They have shareholders. Then they have the management layer, and the management layer look after the business in the interest of the shareholders. Here it's the family, and the family will have all of the tensions that families have got, jealousy and rivalry and all sorts of shifting loyalties within the family as well. And if these are brought to bear on the business and influence the business, it can be very destructive. And the employees, who are not family members, perhaps, they will find that environment very uncomfortable, very unstable. So they may not wish to work there long term. And to that end, talented skills may be lost. Talented people with lots of relevant skills may want to move to other companies. Outside the business, well, the relatives, there's the problems of income and inheritance. Who gets the income from the business, and who will inherit the business, who will inherit the assets of the business and the goodwill of the business. There are, of course, the perennial conflicts within families and the alliances that spring up within families when siblings get together for various reasons and try to outvote other siblings and try to outdo each other, and it's just the permanent dynamics of the family which may influence the business and may influence the conduct of the business. And to what extent are they involved in the business anyway? Is it the case that the constitution of the business grants power to the manager? But then, what are the checks and balances on the manager? The manager presumably must account to someone. Well, if that person decides they don't want to be involved anymore, there's a succession within the family, and we're back into the problems of succession within the family, the rivalry and the plotting and planning. And it may, of course, be a family where everyone agrees and there's broad consensus on what needs to be done. But it may not be that sort of family. It may be a family where some of the family want power for themselves and want to be more involved and get a greater return from the business than others. So again, complex. Outside the family and outside the business. Well, what's happening outside the business? Well, the competition. The competitors are rolling on irrespective. The competitors are there producing products to try and meet customer requirements, innovating the products, trying to get bigger market share. So that's happening irrespective of what's happening within the business. The technology of the business will also be changing as the competitors buy into new technology, the business will have to buy into new technology also. And there's also, of course, always the ever-present tax that needs to be levied on the business, and the business must pay its way. It must produce enough to ensure it can pay taxes and honour its obligations. And outside the business there are also regulatory agencies. It depends on the nature of the product being produced. But if it's a food product, for example, then it will have to adhere to certain standards. Otherwise it could be dangerous, or it could lead to food poisoning, or whatever it is. It could lead to issues with the customers. So regulatory agencies oversee the production, and that happens irrespective of what's happening within the family in terms of perhaps rivalries or debates about who should run the business or who should take what out of the business. That's not taken into account. The regulatory agencies are there anyway. And then there are the trends in management practices that are happening elsewhere, which may be very enlightened in comparison to this model. It may have industrial democracy, or it may have greater recognition of trade unions and workers' rights, and more health and safety, emphasis on health and safety, and holiday entitlements, and bonus payments. And so there may be other forms of management practices being used elsewhere within the industry, which will make this particular business look very old-fashioned and very out of date. In addition to internal and external business pressures, family businesses must also confront the following: legal succession issues, picking the right person, establishing the right person in the job, and agreeing what sort of power that person will have. Now, the person who is selected may not necessarily come from the family, but the person who comes to the task may have his or her own agenda, and that needs to be discussed explicitly right at the start, so that there is clarity on both sides before the appointment is made. So there are legal issues, contracts to be signed and agreed before the succession can take place. There's also survival issues. It's important that when the business is under pressure, perhaps cash flow pressure, that the manager is able to work around this and not necessarily go back to the family, because that would again raise issues about succession and who runs the business and involvement with the business and debates within the family and more involvement. It in a sense it resurrects a lot of debates which were probably had at the start. So it's far better if the manager is able to deal with survival issues independently. And for that reason, the management style will probably be very conservative, so as to not provoke the family to be involved. But there's also issues of strategy and structure. What's the right structure for the business? The manager may have to change the business. Businesses are not constants. They almost mutate over time according to market conditions and customer requirements. And the strategy, of course, will have to account for what the competitors are doing, and globalization, look at government policy, and in fact they should be constantly looking at their Porter's Five Forces analysis, or their PESTEL analysis, or SWOT, or whatever it is. They should constantly be looking at these to try and optimize their strategy and to ensure continuity of the business. Whether that should involve discussions with the family is debatable. It depends on how amenable the family are to this, or whether it would be better for the manager to involve more expert opinion, professional opinion, and try to make the best decisions based on that. But radical decisions about the business, of course, may have to be approved by the family, and that again may be an obstacle or an issue that the manager faces. Now let's go look over these in a little more detail, a little more comment. Start with the legal succession issues. Well, nepotism is a growing concern and has impacted on employment practices within family businesses. Nepotism means passing from, let's say, father to son or father to daughter. So the person who takes over is there by virtue of the fact that their father or their mother started the business. They're not necessarily there on merit. They're not there on business skills. They're there because of their position in the family. Well, that's not a good way to run a business. Perhaps it would be better if those people did something else and a professional or a more skilled person took over the business. It's not to say that nepotism is always bad. It could be good. It could be that the person taking over is ideally suited to run the business. But the business, the long-term survival of the business shouldn't be risked on just the fact that the person is an offspring of the owner, a son or a daughter of the owner. There are other people in the business perhaps who are involved, other stakeholders, the employees, for example. Their jobs are at stake. So it's a little almost cavalier to appoint someone within the family because they're within the family. It might be better to appoint someone who is going to work for the business and for the long-term survival of the business, so that the employees and the other stakeholders can continue to benefit from the business as well. It's not just the family. Nepotism is the practice of favouring relatives and granting them jobs, higher level positions within the business over non-related employees. Well, that's the definition, or that's a way of looking at nepotism, but it's, as I said, somebody within the family gets the position because they're within the family is not a good basis for to secure the business in the long run. It means that the person doesn't necessarily have to have a lot of business skills. They may not be au fait with current business practices, or they may not understand the need for constant checks on innovation and change and customer requirements, and they may not feel that this is thoroughly necessary, and this will lay open their part of the market to the competitors, who will see a weakness in the business and perhaps move in and get their share of the market, so the business would close. So it's not necessarily a good way to run the business. The disadvantage of capable employees, it is a disadvantage for the capable employees, the ones who know what needs to be done and who must be very frustrated by the fact that they can't get it done because the members of the family are coming in and they don't see it the same way. The employees are limited in terms of opportunities for promotion and progression within the family business. So the employees will never be able to work their way up. There is a barrier to them. They know that the higher echelons of the business are blocked off from them. They are the reserve or the preserve of the family members. So there are issues about how the business can survive in the long run if it's going to adopt this sort of policy. As I said, it could be the case that family members are very skilled in business and do a very good job. And there are many examples of family businesses who have handed over from father to son or father to daughter, and have the successors have made a very good, built up the business, made a very good contribution. But it should be based on merit, presumably, not on genetics. The legal issue can have major consequences for family businesses. The business can be sued by employees based on ethnic origin, not being treated the same as a son or daughter. It's some practices within the business can be challenged legally, and obviously the business must work within the ambit of the law. But it does mean that still the ownership resides with the family, and the family will still make the decision as to who runs it, and it will be run according to their preferences and their requirements. There are laws in place to protect employee rights, equality, equal opportunities and diversity. Family businesses will need to accommodate this issue as an external pressure. So clearly the businesses must work within the law, but over and above that they have got discretion as to who runs the business, who's appointed to run the business, and it's their business to appoint those people. It is their business. They own the business. So the law does not get involved there. And they may make bad decisions by appointing family members as opposed to appointing professionals. And also not recognizing talents within the business who could have been promoted upwards, and who ultimately, with experience and with history within the business, could have taken on the top jobs and done excellent jobs in those positions, done an excellent, performed excellently and performed excellent tasks in those positions. But they won't be given the opportunity because they are seen as outside the family. Survival issues. Well, survival is reliant on successful succession planning in family business. Survival depends on successful succession. And succession planning is, as I said in other videos as well, it's a very complex situation. It can lead to infighting within the family when a member of the family is selected to be the successor to the owner when the owner retires. The rest of the family may get upset because they feel it's their turn, or why show favoritism to that particular member of the family. So it is a turbulent time for businesses. If carried out inappropriately, this can result in business failure, loss of profits and investment. It can damage the business. If the business is handed over to the wrong person, then it can result in the closure of the business. So handing it over to the right person, the person who's going to work in the interest of the business and who has got the skills and competencies to do that, that's important. So what is succession? Well, planning for transfer of ownership to the next generation. For example, transfer of business from father to son. or from father to daughter, to be fair. But it's not as simple as just stating that. If there are more in the family than one son or one daughter, then the others may feel aggrieved, and may lead to family tensions. Looking at family businesses is similar to looking at small businesses, but with this extra complication. Planning for succession is an important process and should be carried out with minimal impact on the business. So it should run smoothly. The successor should be spotted and then trained and briefed about the business, shown how the product is made, talked about the markets, understand the competitors, and this should happen over a long period of time. So there should be a long run-in. And whilst that run-in takes place, whilst that training period over a long period of time is happening, the successor can be tested as to what he or she would do under certain circumstances. And that can be contrasted with the owner's opinion, looking at the same set of facts. And that will give a good indication as to the suitability of the successor or the chosen successor in the new role. Most family businesses do not account for succession planning. Most family businesses, it seems to be the case that they let it run to the last moment and just see what happens, and then appoint someone when it's absolutely necessary to do so. Maybe the reason for that is that the owner doesn't want to admit that he or she is getting older and will need to retire, or maybe they don't foresee any reason why to have to hand over the business. They love the business, they started the business, they enjoy doing it, and they don't want to hand it over to someone else. They could be just simply too busy in developing the business, and they don't make any plans for their exit. They're just constantly trying to develop the business, not planning to get out, not planning to retire, just constantly developing it, working on new projects and getting involved in all sorts of parts of the business, and they're keen to be involved. They don't want to leave that, so there's no succession planning. Business owners and members do not have confidence in whoever will be taken over. For example, relatives, offspring, next generation. Sometimes family members looking at their sons and daughters, they don't trust the sons and daughters to be able to do it the same as them. So they don't want to hand it over. It's often the case that parents believe that their children never grow up. They just can't take on the responsibilities of a business, and so they just leave it, and there's no succession planning. It's vital businesses make plans for succession to avoid unexpected situations, for example, death and retirement. Well, retirement may be expected. I wouldn't say that's totally unexpected, but death. If there's no succession planning and there's a family business and the key player dies, then maybe the business is finished. Now that would be bad for the employees and for the customers and for all associated with the business. Bad for the family because they'll lose an income stream. So it's worth having succession planning just in case that were to happen. These issues must be factored into the succession planning process. It's necessary to make the case for succession planning, and have it clearly understood within the family, but clearly understood also the issues that could arise as a consequence of succession planning. For example, conflicts within the family, and have it understood at the outset that conflicts are not required, are not sought in the process. Conflicts should be avoided, and some mechanism of distributing the revenue stream for the business within the family should be sought to compensate those who are not involved in the business, and in a sense buys them off, so that there is less aggression and less debate and disputes and arguments within the family. If organizations have planned for succession, this will enable a smooth transition between ownership in the event of death and retirement. Well, if they have managed to agree on a smooth transition, then of course that's all for the good. It means that the business can continue and the family will still receive a revenue stream, and hopefully a professional and skilled and competent person will have taken over the business, who will grow the business and work for the interest of all the stakeholders of the business. Now, strategy and structure. Well, succession planning can be a difficult and emotional process, and is a complete transfer of ownership, ethics, values, culture and tradition. So it can be an emotional process. The owner who set up the business has developed the business, who's interested in the business. That may be a big part of his or her life. And when it comes to handing it over to someone else, that's emotional. That's a part of their life that's finished. They're not just handing over the business, they're handing over how they see the business. They're handing over their view of the business, what the business should be doing, the ethics, if you like, the values of the business, the culture of the business, how the business should deal with customers and how it should deal with employees and with suppliers, the culture of the business, the tradition, how to go about the business. So it's handing over a lot. It's not just handing over a business, it's handing over a lot of how the business works. At this stage, it's important to have a clear strategy and direction the business aims to move towards. If the business has got a business plan, it's got a strategy, and it should have a business plan, but if it has a business strategy where it wants to be in 5 or 10 years' time, that's a good indicator for the person taking over as to what's needed. It's a pointer, it's a roadmap, and it enables that person to set off in a particular direction, not just to look around and try and find his or her own direction. There is a roadmap into the future. But the roadmap, the strategy, will also entail the issues I've just mentioned in point 1 on this slide: the ethics, the values, the culture and the tradition. Because it's not just a question of going into the future, it's a question of going into the future in a particular way. And the way it wants to go into the future is by having these values and this particular way of dealing with the employees and the stakeholders and the image it wants to project of itself, the type of business it is, its reputation. There are 2 strategies a family business can adopt: business expansion or family of businesses. So the business, when it's developed to a certain level, it can move towards business expansion, grow even bigger, or it can hive off into smaller businesses. And this is when a big decision within the family has to be made. Business expansion, well, it requires a succession process in search of the next leadership team, owner, management structure. So business expansion means looking for the next leader, the next person to run the business. The person with the right skills, competencies, abilities, the right temperament, who can take over the business and run the business with the same views, the same culture, the same orientation as the owner, the person leaving the business. Family of companies. Well, to grow the family business, some prefer to separate the business into branches which are run by different family members. It depends on the size of the business, but if the business is a significant size, it may be possible to hive off parts. So we have a separate set of businesses, perhaps all related, but all doing separate functions and run separately. So each member of the family each have a business, and in that way there's no conflict within the family. But there may be issues about the economics of this. The individual businesses may be too small and not viable, or may not have the capital base to do it. So there are issues about just liberally hiving off different parts of the business and setting up this family of companies. It sounds as a solution to any problems within the family, any disputes within the family as to who gets the business. But in terms of the economics, it may not be such a great idea. It depends on the size of the original business and the capacity or the ability of the owner to split it in this particular way. So it depends on the nature of the business, and it depends on the size of the business. Long video, that's the source that we've used right throughout our discussion of succession. Hodgetts and Kuratko is standard text. It's quite an old text now, but standard text in the area if you can get your hands on it. But that's all we're going to deal with here, so let's leave it at that and say thank you for watching.